Olivia Grant never imagined that the two people she trusted most would be the ones to betray her in the worst possible way. Ethan, her devoted husband, and Isabella, her loving mother, had spent months hiding a secret so vile it shattered Olivia's world in an instant. A forbidden affair, a pregnancy, a web of lies spun so tightly around her that by the time she uncovered the truth, there was no way out except through blood. Olivia Mendez had always believed in love. She grew up watching her mother, Isabella Vega, navigate life with elegance and grace. Isabella was a woman who commanded attention, not just because of her beauty, but because of the way she carried herself, always confident, always in control. Olivia admired her mother deeply, often seeking her advice on everything from career moves to personal relationships. When she met Ethan Crowley, she felt as if she had finally found the missing piece in her life. Ethan was charming, intelligent, and had a way of making Olivia feel like the most important person in the world. He worked as a financial analyst, a job that required long hours, but provided them with a comfortable life. Olivia, an interior designer, had a creative spirit that balanced Ethan's structured world. Together, they seemed like the perfect couple, successful, attractive, and deeply in love. Their friends often commented on how they were made for each other, and Olivia believed it too. From the outside, their life looked idyllic. They had a beautiful home in a quiet suburban neighborhood, complete with a white picket fence and a neatly manicured lawn. Weekends were spent hosting dinner parties, traveling to scenic locations, or simply enjoying each other's company. Olivia took pride in the life they had built together. She envisioned a future filled with milestones, buying a vacation home, raising children, and growing old side by side. One of the most significant influences in Olivia's life had always been her mother. Isabella was not just a parent, but a confidant, someone Olivia trusted implicitly. Since Olivia's father had left when she was just a teenager, Isabella had filled both parental roles, ensuring her daughter had everything she needed. Over the years, they became inseparable. Even after Olivia married Ethan, she maintained a close bond with her mother, often inviting her over for dinners and weekend visits. Ethan and Isabella got along well from the start. Isabella had an effortless charm that made it easy for her to connect with people, and Ethan was no exception. He respected her, often praising her strength and beauty. At first, Olivia found it heartwarming that her husband and mother had such an amicable relationship. It reassured her that the two most important people in her life could coexist without friction. She never imagined that this closeness would one day become her worst nightmare. As the years passed, Olivia noticed subtle changes in her marriage. Ethan, once affectionate and attentive, became distant. He often blamed work stress for his mood swings, and Olivia, trusting him completely, accepted his explanations. She told herself that every marriage went through phases, that they would find their way back to each other. She even turned to her mother for advice, seeking reassurance that her concerns were unfounded. Isabella, ever the voice of reason, assured her that men sometimes needed space and that she shouldn't overthink things. But the signs were there, hiding in plain sight. Ethan started spending more time away from home, his business trips becoming more frequent. When he was home, he seemed distracted, his phone always within reach. Olivia occasionally caught him smiling at his screen, but when she asked, he brushed it off as a work email or a joke from a colleague. She wanted to believe him, to hold on to the image of the man she had married. Then there were the moments with Isabella that, in hindsight, should have raised alarms. Ethan and Isabella's interactions seemed normal at first, perhaps even a little playful. He complimented her often, telling her she didn't look like someone in her late 40s. Isabella laughed it off, saying he was just being polite. Olivia never questioned these moments, never considered that the warmth between them might be something more. The shift in her marriage was slow, like a crack in the foundation of a house that spreads unnoticed until it's too late. Olivia told herself that everything was fine, that her husband was just going through a difficult time. She convinced herself that she had nothing to worry about, that the love they had built over the years was unbreakable. But what she didn't know was that the betrayal had already begun, and soon her perfect world would come crashing down. Olivia had always trusted her instincts, but when it came to Ethan, she ignored the small voice in her head that whispered something was wrong. The late nights at work, the secretive behavior, the way he flinched when she touched his phone. It was all there warning her. But love had a way of making people blind to the truth, and Olivia was no exception. She reassured herself that marriage had its ups and downs, that Ethan was just stressed, that everything would return to normal, but things didn't return to normal. If anything, they got worse. Ethan became more distant, his affection fading, into nothing more than routine pleasantries. He still said, "I love you," but the words felt hollow, lacking the warmth they once held. He avoided eye contact when he spoke to her, and his touch, once reassuring, now felt forced. Olivia felt like a stranger in her own marriage, watching her husband slip away from her, with no way to pull him back. Then there were the excuses. He was always too tired for date nights, too busy to take calls during the day, too preoccupied to notice when Olivia tried to engage him in conversation. The Ethan she had married, the man who once made her feel like the most important person in his world, had been replaced by someone she barely recognized. And yet, she still clung to hope. It wasn't until she found the hidden phone that her world shattered. She had been organizing their shared office when she found it tucked inside the back of a drawer, almost as if someone had placed it there in a hurry. At first, she thought it was an old phone Ethan had forgotten about, but curiosity got the best of her. She pressed the power button, and to her surprise, the screen lit up, displaying an active lock screen. She tried the passcode he always used, and it unlocked immediately. That was when she saw the messages. They were explicit, intimate, and filled with promises that Ethan had never made to her. Her hands trembled as she scrolled, her breath catching in her throat. The texts detailed secret meetings at a secluded cabin, shared memories she knew nothing about, and worst of all, confessions of love. Olivia's vision blurred as she reached the most devastating revelation of all. Isabella was pregnant. Her heart pounded as she read the words over and over, unable to process them. Isabella Vega, her mother, the woman she had idolized, the woman who had raised her, comforted her, given her advice about her marriage. The very same woman had been sleeping with her husband behind her back. And now, she was carrying his child. A wave of nausea washed over Olivia, and she staggered backward, her mind spinning. She gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself, but the weight of betrayal threatened to crush her. How could this be real? How long had it been happening? Every family dinner, every holiday, every moment she had spent with them suddenly took on a sinister meaning. They had been lying to her all along, smiling to her face while living out their twisted affair in secret. The messages didn't just confirm the affair, they revealed the depth of deception. Ethan had been funneling money into Isabella's account, supporting her, while Olivia unknowingly contributed to the betrayal. He had been telling Isabella that he loved her, that he was going to leave Olivia, that they would be a family. Olivia's fingers tightened around the phone, her pulse roaring in her ears. A mixture of fury and heartbreak consumed her, and for a brief moment, she felt like she couldn't breathe. The betrayal was too much, too overwhelming, too cruel. She dropped the phone onto the desk and backed away as if the device itself was tainted. She needed answers. She needed to know how long this had been happening, how deeply they had planned to deceive her. Most of all, she needed to know what she was going to do next. Olivia couldn't sleep. The weight of what she had discovered pressed down on her like a crushing force, refusing to let her mind rest. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Ethan's slow, steady breathing beside her. How could he sleep so soundly while living a double life? The betrayal ran deeper than she ever imagined, and the more she thought about it, the more she needed answers. The next morning, she called in sick to work and spent hours piecing together the timeline. of their deception. She checked bank statements, phone records, and anything that could tell her how long this had been going on. The evidence was damning. Ethan had been sending money to Isabella for nearly a year. Weekend trips, he claimed, were for work lined up, with messages about their rendezvous at the cabin. He had been careful, but not careful enough. Olivia now had proof that her husband and mother had spent months living a secret life behind her back. But proof wasn't enough. She needed confirmation, something undeniable that would eliminate any lingering hope that there was some kind of misunderstanding. That was when she decided to hire a private investigator. She found Samuel Pike, a man known for his discretion and efficiency, and within a day, he had already begun his work. Samuel traced Isabella's recent activities and confirmed what Olivia had feared. Her mother had been visiting a private medical clinic, likely for prenatal care. Security footage placed Isabella and Ethan together in places they shouldn't have been, their interactions too intimate to be mistaken for anything else. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning a future together. Olivia's hands shook as she reviewed the information Samuel provided. The betrayal wasn't just a moment of weakness between two people. It was deliberate, calculated. Every moment of their secret meetings had been a decision, a choice to deceive her. Isabella, the woman Olivia had trusted most, had willingly stepped into the role of her greatest enemy. The worst part was knowing that Ethan had been lying to both of them. Samuel uncovered messages where Ethan reassured Isabella that he would leave Olivia, that their child would have a stable home, that they just needed more time. Yet, to Olivia, he pretended everything was fine, still coming home to her, still sharing the same bed. He had been playing both sides, manipulating them, ensuring he got everything he wanted without facing the consequences. Olivia's grief turned to fury. She had spent years building a life with Ethan, believing in the love they had shared. And now it was all a lie. She wasn't just angry at her mother or at Ethan. She was angry at herself for not seeing the truth sooner. She replayed every moment in her head, every time she had ignored the warning signs, every time she had chosen to believe in their marriage. The pain was unbearable, but she wasn't going to let them destroy her without a fight. She needed a plan. She wouldn't confront them blindly, wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Instead, she would make them face the consequences of what they had done. She arranged a dinner at their home, inviting Isabella under the pretense of needing to talk. Ethan, unaware of what she had discovered, agreed without hesitation. Olivia spent the rest of the day preparing herself, forcing her emotions into a cage, ensuring she wouldn't fall apart when the moment came. As the evening approached, she set the table with precision, every plate and glass placed perfectly. It was almost poetic. One last meal before their carefully built web of lies came crashing down. She took a deep breath and waited, knowing that by the end of the night, nothing in their lives would ever be the same again. The dinner table was set, the air thick with tension that Olivia tried to disguise behind a polite smile. Isabella arrived first, her demeanor as composed as ever. If she felt any guilt, it didn't show. She kissed Olivia's cheek as if nothing was wrong, as if she hadn't spent the last year betraying her own daughter. Olivia forced herself to remain calm, though her skin crawled at the touch. Ethan walked in shortly after, loosening his tie, as he greeted them. He looked at Olivia with the same indifferent expression he had worn for months, the kind that once made her question what she had done wrong. Now she knew it had never been her. It had always been him. He had been living two lives, and tonight it would all unravel. They ate in silence, the sound of silverware clinking against porcelain the only thing filling the void. Olivia studied them carefully, the two people who had shattered her world, watching the ease with which they pretended nothing was wrong. It disgusted her. When the tension became unbearable, she set her fork down and spoke. "I know everything." Both Ethan and Isabella froze. The words hung in the air, heavier than anything else that had been said that night. Isabella's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her glass of water. But Ethan was the first to respond. "What do you mean?" His voice was controlled, but Olivia could see the flicker of fear in his eyes. She pulled out the hidden phone she had found, placing it on the table between them. She watched as Ethan's face drained of color. Isabella's lips parted slightly, but no words came out. "The messages," Olivia continued, her voice steady despite the fire burning inside her. "The money transfers, the cabin, the doctors, visits." She turned to her mother now, her stomach twisting at the sight of the woman she had once loved more than anyone. "The pregnancy." Isabella finally spoke, her voice quiet, almost pleading. "Olivia, No." Olivia cut her off. "You don't get to explain. You don't get to lie to me anymore." Ethan stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "You went through my things," he accused, as if he had the right to be outraged. "You spied on me." Olivia laughed, a hollow sound that held no humor. "You were sleeping with my mother, and you're mad that I found out." The mask Ethan had been wearing slipped completely. His jaw tightened, and for the first time, Olivia saw something else in his eyes. Anger. Not guilt, not remorse, just anger at being caught. Isabella reached for Olivia's hand, but Olivia pulled away. "Please, sweetheart," Isabella whispered. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." Olivia felt her chest tighten. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this?" As if that changed anything. As if their betrayal would have been easier to stomach if she had found out another way. Ethan clenched his fists, his whole body tense. "So what now?" he demanded. "Are you going to ruin everything?" Olivia stared at him, stunned by his audacity. "Ruin everything," she repeated, her voice shaking now. "You already did that." And then it happened. Ethan lunged forward, his hands gripping Olivia's wrist as if trying to take control, as if he still had power over her. But Olivia had spent too long being blind, too long ignoring the truth. She wouldn't let him intimidate her. Without thinking, she reached for the steak knife beside her plate and swung. The blade sank into Ethan's chest before she even registered what she had done. His grip loosened instantly, his body staggering backward, knocking over his chair. Isabella screamed, hands flying to her mouth as she watched the scene unfold. Ethan gasped, his hand pressing against the wound, blood seeping between his fingers. He stumbled, his legs giving out as he collapsed onto the floor. The room spun. Around Olivia, the reality of what she had just done slamming into her all at once. The sound of sirens in the distance barely registered in her mind. The neighbors had heard the commotion. Someone had called for help. But it was too late. Ethan's body was motionless, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Olivia didn't fight when the police stormed in. She didn't resist when they placed her in handcuffs. She didn't even cry. She simply watched as Isabella sobbed beside Ethan's body, cradling her stomach, the unborn child still a grim reminder of everything that had led to this moment. The courtroom was silent as Olivia sat at the defense table, her hands folded in her lap. The fluorescent lights above buzzed softly, an irritating hum that filled the quiet spaces between the judge's words. The trial had moved quickly, too quickly. The prosecution painted her as a jealous, enraged wife who had snapped in a fit of passion. They showed the jury images of Ethan's lifeless body, the knife still embedded in his chest, the blood pooling beneath him. They described her actions as cold-blooded, premeditated murder. Olivia barely heard them. She felt as if she were outside of herself, watching the trial from a distance. The moment she had plunged the knife into Ethan's chest replayed over and over in her mind. She hadn't planned it, hadn't thought about it. It had been instinct, a reaction to his aggression, to the betrayal, to the years of lies, but no one cared about that. Isabella was there, sitting on the witness stand, her hands shaking as she dabbed at her tear-streaked face. She played the grieving victim well. Her voice cracked as she spoke about how she had never meant to hurt her daughter, how the affair had been a mistake, how she had wanted to tell Olivia but didn't know how. She painted Ethan as the manipulator, claiming he had seduced her, promising her a future she had been foolish enough to believe in. Olivia felt sick. Even now, after everything, her mother still refused to take responsibility. She had the audacity to play the victim, to stand there and act as if she hadn't betrayed her own daughter in the worst way imaginable. The jury was sympathetic to Isabella, seeing her as a broken woman caught in a tragic situation. But Olivia was the wife who had snapped, a woman scorned, a murderer. Her lawyer did what he could, arguing that Ethan had grabbed her first, that she had acted in self-defense. But the evidence was damning. Ethan was unarmed. Olivia had invited him to dinner. She had picked up the knife. The prosecution had woven a tight narrative, one that made it impossible for the jury to see her as anything other than guilty. The verdict came swiftly. Guilty of manslaughter. The words barely registered. The courtroom blurred around her. The sentence was lighter than it could have been. 15 years instead of life. But it didn't matter. Her life as she knew it was over. The next few weeks passed in a haze. The prison walls were cold, the air stale. The routines were strict, the days repetitive. Olivia barely spoke. She kept to herself, lost in her thoughts, replaying everything over and over. She had always imagined growing old with Ethan, building a family, creating a life full of love. Instead, she was here, locked away, forgotten. She saw Isabella only once after the trial. Her mother visited, her belly now round with Ethan's child. She sat across from Olivia, her eyes filled with something unreadable. Guilt, pity, regret. "I'm sorry," Isabella whispered. Olivia stared at her, unblinking. "I didn't mean for things to end like this," Isabella continued. Olivia exhaled slowly. The anger she had carried, the rage that had fueled her, was gone now. In its place was something else, emptiness. "You got what you wanted," Olivia said finally, her voice hollow. "You have his child. You're free. Congratulations." Isabella flinched as if she had been struck. "That's not—" "Don't come back." Isabella's lips trembled, but she didn't argue. She stood, lingering for a moment as if hoping Olivia would change her mind. But Olivia just turned her head, staring at the wall until she heard the door shut behind her mother for the last time. In the end, Isabella got to walk away. She got to live her life, raise her child, move on. Olivia had nothing left except the knowledge that she had once believed in love, and it had destroyed her.